There it is. It's right up there on the little whiteboard on the left there. Welcome, Midwest City. Welcome, Shawnee. If you're tuning in this morning, I have Lisa. Marilyn are here with me. And so if I don't come back and look at you again, I'm not ignoring you. I've just got other people in the room. So we're going to take off this morning and see what we can learn and see if this broadcast will continue all the way till 10 o'clock. If it drops off, text me and I'll try to notice and see if we solved that problem from last week or not. All right. We had a question right off the bat. Lisa Elrod is here, by the way. This is her first Monday morning huddle. And she has a question about earnest money. She's talking about the olden days. She had a license years ago. And things were done a little differently back before we had digital signatures. Now we have digital signatures probably for about the last 3 or 4 years, 3 years or so at least, that we've been loading all of our stuff onto a digital platform rather than handing in a file. So when that came along, we had to figure out, and you're so right, the earnest money used to be paperclip to the purchase contract that you personally drove over and delivered to the realtor. And that's how we knew we had one. We didn't know if the check was any good, but we knew we had a check. We actually had the account number. We had everything right there in our hands, and that's why we're licensed, so that we can be trusted carrying that around. And so here we come with the digital world, and several dynamics happened since then. One of them is we're not always sitting down with the people to present the proposal. I like the word proposal better than offer. Because offer implies that it's something less than the asking price. And when we ask a buyer, what would you like to offer? It's kind of like we're begging them to come in low. So I like the word proposal. It's a little more neutral. What would you like to propose? And then if they need help with closing costs or some of that kind of thing, maybe they ought to propose the asking price at least, because they're negotiating 3 or 4% off the asking price with the closing cost if we're asking for them anyway. So the earnest money question then is how do we manage that? And so right now we're drafting the contract forms on your computer, and we're sending it from your computer straight to the buyer. We hopefully when they get it, we go, contact them and go over it with them and say, okay, here's what it says. And we have some time spent there. I fear we're not doing that much or as much as we used to, but it's, they need to know what they signed. And so they're running. I got it. Thank you. So they need to know what they signed. So we need to go over some with them. Did you get a copy of the contract? And they open their email up and there it is and they can read it. But along the way, there are places for them to sign it. And typically what most buyers are doing is just tabbing from one signing or initial spot to the next, and bam, when they've signed the last spot, it's coming straight back to us or going straight to the realtor, depending on how we set it up when we send it to them. But the question of the earnest money is, obviously, we don't have the earnest money yet. We have in the blank what it's supposed to be. We have in the, right behind that, in that paragraph 2 on the purchase contract, where it's supposed to go. And the default language is it's going to the listing agent if you don't put anything in the blank. But as Lisa said earlier, we're taking it to the title company a lot. She also said the buyer used to get to choose where to take that. And in fact, they should still have the choice as to where that is going. It depends a little bit. There are some
What if the seller
variables.
pays closing costs?
If the seller's paying all the closing costs and title work for them, they have something to say about it too. At the end of the day, it hasn't been much of a wrestling match because everybody just wants to get it done.
Yeah.
and they're not too particular about where it was. So if we had a deal fall through and the title work was already done someplace, it makes a little sense to leave it there. If it's an REO, repo of some kind, and they've already got the title work done, or have people set in those title companies that are authorized to sign the paperwork as if they were the seller, they got power of attorney, it makes sense to leave it there too for that purpose. And then some new construction, those builders have their abstracting and all that stuff done and get discounts, or at least that's what they claim. So there are some of those dynamics. But at the end of the day, where's it going? And the buyer should be able to write in where they'd like to close, and that becomes a negotiable matter probably. And I guess we could fight the battle, but by the time we get done winning the battle, we haven't closed, and we'd be done ready to close by then. So the earnest money basically now is acknowledged in the contract how much it is and where it goes, but we don't have it. We might have a copy, a picture. We block out the count number at the bottom and the tracking number. Maybe wouldn't be a bad idea to do. Maryland's having a revelation. Maryland's having a revelation over here. Oh my God. Yeah, it wouldn't be a bad idea. Now, if she's getting ready to hand you a check, she will think of it. But otherwise, if somebody else is. So, the routing numbers and all that stuff is on those checks, and count numbers are on them. So I'd like to just block, just take a black marker and block the copy, run a copy, if your copier will actually run it. Some copiers won't even run a copy of a check, and they certainly won't run a copy of a cash. But you can take a picture of it. Lisa's on to it. Lisa takes it. You can take a picture of it, but then block that out. Yes. No, personal check is fine as far as custom is concerned still. And but ultimately, you might want to send something with your proposal that says, "I have it." That's a good idea. And I've blocked out the account number, taken a picture, and here it goes with the offer, and that way you got, along with your pre-approval letter, something, or at least proof of funds, something to verify that I have the earnest money, and I have the and I got the financing line. That'd be ideal if you had it. There's no law says you have to do that, but we are. Some listing brokers require it. That's right. They should. And so some are requiring it. I would. If I'm getting ready to make a decision and you need financing. Then I'd like to know, is there some reason anybody believes that you can actually do this before we take our house off the market for 30 to 45 or 60 days and find that. The contract's got in it default language on the finance supplements, about third paragraph down or so. It states that the buyer authorizes the lender to let the listing agent know that they've applied, that they've run their credit, and their credit looks like it's sufficient as far as their credit score is concerned, that they've ordered the appraisal and paid any upfront fees. There's a document now, Dodd-Frank law, we've been wrestling with for a number of years, requires a document. I forget what it is, but it's an authorization to proceed, I think is the name of it, that once the contract comes into the lender, they cannot order the appraisal. They cannot proceed with anything until that has been done. It can be a telephone call. Hey, is it okay if we proceed with your loan? Yes or no. It could be an email. Hey, I'm authorizing you to proceed with the loan. But I did not know until just a few weeks ago that document had to be signed before they could actually proceed. And sometimes that's the holdup. So is that they're just waiting to order appraisals and do some of that kind of stuff because they don't have that authorization. It doesn't have to be even in writing, just a phone call, but you got to answer your phone. So you guys, as we work with these buyers, tell them, by the way, as soon as we send over the documents to the mortgage company and the title company, the mortgage company in particular,
it can't be done ahead of time. It has to be.
I think after they get the contract in hand, do you still want to use us as kind of the question is, that's what's being answered. You still want to use us for your loan processing so that they don't start that while you're shopping around somewhere else.
Yeah.
So
that's true.
Hang on, Midwest City. Casey Cook has just walked up. He should be acknowledged. And we're speaking to folks in Shawnee and Midwest City and there and then here. It's kind of like the church says, well, we have this many members, but 250 of them are online. When we go online and we find out there's only 3, you know, I mean, that's possibly what's going on here. So anyway, but the earnest money, you ought to get, there's a place on the contract form to sign that you received it. In fact, we spent last Friday working on fixing that. We just modified that page where we're acknowledging we got the earnest money, and there's a place where it says the listing agent got it, and they're going to give a receipt to the selling agent, you know, to let them know that they received it. And there's one that says the selling agent got it, and then there's one that says, you know, what's the address of the title company. That's been confusing, worse than what we probably had before. So we spent all day Friday working on something that'll be more user-friendly, but it can't come out until next year. So meanwhile, right now, there's a place that says who got it, and then if you got it, you had your hands on it. And that's what Sherry at the Real Estate Commission's standard is in terms of tracking who got the earnest money is that you have your hands on it. If your hands were on it, no, acknowledge you had it, you got it, but then what'd you do with it? So in these digital world, we've come to full agreement on the purchase contract, and nobody's ever had their hands on it. In fact, including the selling agent sometimes. They basically call and say, hey, that house you showed us there a few hours ago, we've decided to take some action on it. Could you write it up? Sure. Type it all up, send it to them. They send it back signed. We forward it to the listing agent without an earnest money check actually in our hands. It says they're going to have one and how much and where it goes, but we don't have it. So the rule of thumb is you don't sign unless you touched it. Or if you got a copy, a receipt from somebody that says, hey, we got it, we took it over to the title company, or we put it in our escrow account, whatever it is, but that receipt is a touched it sort of a thing. So that's when you would sign saying, I actually acknowledge that it was received and where it went. Some of this stuff is to do with the lenders. They are, you know, sometimes our people have not signed down there because they never touched it. It just went, in fact, the buyer just got in his car and drove it straight over to the title company, and neither the listing realtor or the selling realtor touched it, really. And so what do you do? Well, brokers are supposed to be responsible for at least acknowledging where to go. So in that case, the title company ought to receipt it and let the listing agent know we got it, and that the listing agent lets the selling agent know we got it, and the receipt constitutes somebody touched it. So
send people copies.
Yeah, everybody, and you know what they do at the title company, they just have a little, they just run a copy and sign off on it, date it, and whoever got it, and that's been what we've been doing.
That's what I did on mine this time, because I've never even met the buyer. He's from Tulsa, that he's buying the house for his mom. And so he wrote the check out, took a picture of it and sent it to me. And so I told him to put it in the mail. So I did not check that I had received it, but I did note on there that it would be mailed.
Yep.
And so I was having it mailed here. I just had to reach out to Keller Williams Realty.
Noted on what? That it would be mailed on the contract or something? Excellent. That is the teaching moment. Just because the parties can agree to anything, including it won't even be deposited. It'll be held over here in Maryland's mail slot. That you know, that could be agreed to by the parties. It's kind of stupid, but that can. It's the trick is, do the parties know where it is and what's supposed to happen? And then the broker is supposed to make sure it did happen. It's not only a receipt. We're not accountable for whether it clears. That's another question later, if it, you know, and whether the check clears.
Should it be held until it's agreed, until you have a negotiated contract?
Pardon me?
Should it be held until you actually have an agreed upon contract?
Yes. It shouldn't be deposited until we actually have a meeting of the minds.
Okay.
It's just held by somebody if it exists. The selling agent usually wrote the contract and they sat in the office and did it and they brought it in or whatever. but it should not be deposited until we have a meeting of the minds, unless somebody agrees to that in advance some way or another. But it would just be.
This would be hard to get back.
Yeah, you got to go now and have some staff person recut it out, the track that it went in there, went out, why, and document all that. It's a hassle. So until you have a meeting of the minds, then you just hold on to it. If you have it in your hands. If you don't have it in your hands and they're just saying, yeah, we'll send it as soon as we come to agreement, that's common and I think it's acceptable. The contract just says what's supposed to happen. But once they've gotten it agreed upon, the buyer tends to take a deep breath and relax and say, we beat the market out, on this one, we got the house. Now I can relax a little bit. Well, not really.
There's no relaxing.
And, we need that earnest money. We need your loan application. We need you to order the appraisals. All those dynamics need now to be getting done. And we are the project manager. It's what I'd love you to see yourself as. I'm the hub of the wheel project manager. And now I got all the inspectors, appraisers, title companies, my staff people, all are part of this transaction now. And we're getting ready to deliver an experience. At the end of the day, if they have a good experience, because things went pretty smooth, they'll be referring you people. But if this is hiccups and, unmet expectations over and over and over, they may not be too interested in referring you their friends so they can go through this thing they just experienced. So that's part of why we like to choose somewhat who are they going to be dealing with. 2 or 3 title companies that we just know will do a good job and we can predict their behavior. 2 or 3 lenders, 2 or 3 inspectors, 2 or 3 termite people, so that when those players get into our assembly line, we can predict that they're going to be responsive, or if not, why we use them. They're excellent at this or that. I use one of our handymen as an example. He's very, very good. He can do almost anything, but he's a perfectionist. That's why he's very, very good. But he'll complain all along because you're not giving him enough money to do it perfectly. But he'll do it at the price you need it done at, if it's reasonable, and cut the corners if you ask him to. But he'll gripe a little bit. So I just tell the folks, listen, the guy's going to gripe a little. Just let him. Because at the end, he's going to do a better job than you expect him to do, because he can't stand it. And he'll do it in the price range that you need it done in, even if he cuts him a little bit out of his margins. But that's why you do it. Mortgage person, I'll never have to call Kathy to know what the status of that loan is. She will always keep me updated before I ever get a chance to call her. However, she's very direct to the point, very efficient. And she will sometimes, this is an exaggeration, she will sometimes say, hello, what do you want? Not quite that bad, but I mean, be ready for her to be right to the point, because she's busy and that's why she gets stuff done earlier. But if I don't tell you, she's going to be very direct to the point. You're going to feel like she's abrasive and not very friendly, doesn't even like you. It's not the case. She's just very focused. I like that in her. But if you can't take that, I got to recommend somebody else that's got a little bit better bedside manner. But I'm going to have to call them 2 or 3 times along the way to make sure everything's in order, because they won't call me quite as often or as efficiently as she will. So that we set the expectation from the start to the end. But if you're using people that you don't know, they went online, got some loan approved or what, and you're just at the mercy of whatever that's going to be, you can't predict it. And I usually, whenever they've got somebody, I'm approved I went online, I'm fully approved, then I'll basically say, well, we're going to roll the dice and see what kind of experience we have. I'll predict as much as I can, but I can't predict this yet. I will next time. But this time through, we're all going to go through this adventure for the first time and see what kind of service we get, see if they're responsive, see if they even know what they're doing. So that's like Liam. But the earnest money then is just a question of, how do we get it delivered? Mail's fine, but just 3 or 4 or 5 days possibly before it actually arrives here. Once we've received it, we have 3 banking days is actually the words in the Real Estate Commission's. It's on page 57 in case you want to look it up. Maybe 22, I can't remember which. I think it's actually on 22 in the Real Estate Commission manual.
Have a manual?
You know, it's the code and rules. They call it the license code and then the rules. And the rules need to kind of match the code in terms of what the standards are for what's an acceptable behavior. But that Friday conversation at the Real Estate Commission, at the committees, Contract and Reforms Committee conversation, that's where Sherry said, I just look at whose hands it touched and what happened to it when we go investigating transactions and trying to figure out what happened with the money part of it. So I don't know, I went all over the place to answer that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that helps a lot.
Because ultimately, at the end of the day, I mean, you could load that copy right in the loop, and then later the receipt that says I got the receipt in the loop or in the folder on the loop.
So within 3 banking days, somebody needs to deposit it somewhere.
Yes,
Title company, Keller Williams, or the
whoever received it ought to. Now,
if we
what are
have-
banking days? And here's straight from Sherry also just on Friday. I mean, this is a wonderful thing to be able to sit up there in that room discussing contracts and forms, but get to hear the standard. She says she counts Saturday as a banking day.
Really?
Monday through Saturday, because most banks are open till noon on Saturday. But if you can demonstrate, oh, it wasn't, my bank doesn't open on Saturday, or the inside doesn't at least. Maybe the drive-through is all that's open. Then they give you some grace on that. But hers is, most banks are open Monday through Saturday. Some are open actually on Sundays, some places. Mine isn't, but apparently they are. But that's her standard. Monday through Saturday are banking days, excluding federal holidays. So federal holidays are not a banking day. That's the definition of it. As of 3 days or 2 days ago, straight from the people that hold us accountable for those words. So anyway, let me see what this is with somebody. Okay. Does a buyer or seller order the inspection? This is Leslie. Leslie sometimes watches from her work computer. And I don't think she is now because she's asking me a question. Oh, Leslie, if you're watching, send me the question. Let me know you're watching. We'll answer it. Otherwise, I'll call you after a while. Oh, by the way, the buyer asked the question. I know. I still don't have who does what and when in my mind yet. Okay. She's about to get a contract together. I think I've listened. She gets got it. All right. So that makes sense. Earnest money question. You're pretty good on it too. All right. The main thing to remember is just, I'm not acknowledging I received it until I actually have in my hand a receipt. And it can come in email, and you can never actually touch it, but you actually got something that says it's been received, and it doesn't say it's clear to me. So that's another question later on. But there are quite a few dynamics while I'm on this. I prefer us it being in a broker's account, not at a title company. I'll be honest about it.
Really? That's how we used to do it all the time.
Yeah, the brokers have some responsibility or could have choices if they're holding it. Whereas if it's at a title company, they're governed by they're not governed by the Real Estate Commission. So they don't have the same set of guidelines as we do regarding that. What you got?
By the way, I thought the other way about the title companies where I wanted it, that way we wouldn't have to remember to get the check. The broker of this place and the owner of all three, agrees with you.
Yes, thank you very much. I have it confirmed. Yeah. Yeah,
That's how.
because thank you, Grant. I appreciate that because I mean, at the end of the day,
Have them write it out to the selling, to the listing.
Yeah.
Brokerage.
we had one of our bigger companies here in town though decide, you know what, I don't want to have an escrow account. In fact, another one
I thought they had to have an escrow account.
well, the real estate, the rules and the code and rules that I referred to, that's about a book about that thick, states that you do have. You're a signer on it and you have an escrow account, But if you're not putting anything in it, I guess you don't have to have one. And so one of the companies just decided, I guess, I don't know what the reasoning was, except that I just don't want to have to mess with keeping track of what went in and what went out. And then we started having to do it because of them. And what Grant just said was what happened. The convenience of its closing day, and we just show up there and voila, that check's there already. Whereas if we deposit it at the listing agent broker's account or in the selling broker's account, somebody has to remember to bring it. And a staff member needs to remember to cut it. So if Michelle in this case, I think would probably, maybe Dina, I'm not sure which now, but one of them cuts the check and just has it out at the front desk a week or so ahead, maybe a day or two ahead, and just there. So you can come by and pick it up and off you go. But if you move the closing up a week or 10 days, it may not be ready. And so if you don't communicate that to her, by the way, Michelle, I'm closing a little early. We moved the closing date up 10 days and we've got the earnest money. You need to, I need to get that check. If you forget that, because in all of your exuberance over we're closing early, which can happen, you got a lot of ducks in a row now, all of a sudden getting ready because it's actually ready early and you're not quite maybe as ready as you thought. That's easy to forget. No, not terminal. You just call them and say, I forgot. I'm the king of I forgot earnest money, personally. I don't know how many dozens and dozens of times a year I drive back to the dang office and get that earnest money because I forgot to bring it. But they won't, they won't disperse without it normally.
Who's the check go to? Who's it written out to?
That would be, she would make it out to the title company.
Okay.
Wherever you're closing, along with them, their cashier's check and the loan proceeds, all comes together into a pile of money, and then they start dispersing it to people once they know they have it. But that check they'll accept just like cash. Anyway, that's kind of how the machinery works.
So to be clear, you can, if you just have the buyer, not the listing, you can put it in your broker's.
Yes, you can. So if that company does not have an escrow account and you're writing the contract on it, I think I'd maybe start by just saying, selling agent will hold the earnest money in the selling agent's trust account. Now, what's the earnest money for?
Say I'm gonna buy it.
It's a deposit, earnest, saying if I don't follow through with what promises I made, that would be the liquidated damages that we agreed to. So in that default section in the contract, it's under when the buyer defaults, that buyer default part of the contract stipulates that the seller's options are to keep the earnest money as liquidated damages, or not both, just one or the other, or pursue legal remedies, including specific performance. And specific performance is not terribly practical because it ties the property up in months, and it just doesn't make good sense if you actually need to sell your house. So most of the time, in fact, every time in 40 years of my career, they've accepted the earnest money as liquidated damages and sign off that's, they have to sign off and agree to it. Here's the deal though. If it's not in a broker's account, one of the options, you got one option is that just everybody signs a release and agrees. One of them or the other of them is getting the earnest money. The second option is you went to mediation and a mediator worked it out and you agreed to whatever the mediator said. That's number two. Number three is you agreed to an interpleader action, which basically says we're going to hand it off to the district court and a judge is going to decide this. And the fourth option is the one that you give up if you take it to the title company, is that the broker who has the earnest money has the discretion after 30 days to give the parties a notice at their last known address, a minimum of 15 days in advance of what they intend to do with it. And they have the choice of deciding, I'm going to give it to them or I'm going to give it to them. The broker has the choice. I have seldom ever seen a broker put themselves in that position. But if The earnest monies, is from someplace clear across the state, and it's cut and dried, basically, who's supposed to get it. He has the choice. Most of the time, they won't do it because they don't want to be liable for somebody coming back. But if they give him 15 days notice and there's nobody responds within that 15 days objecting to the disbursement he's proposing, he's probably safe, because we can say, well, we notified you, you didn't object, and we did what we thought was right to do. But Susan Miller up at the Edmond office says, I have never, and I don't intend to ever, in a contract forms class that I had up in that office up there, I went over this. I said, now let's read what this all says. And I was harping on the appraisal being ordered in terms of what was supposed to be done as far as the application is concerned. And we got down below that where we were discussing the seller's options. If the buyer doesn't pay for the appraisal, doesn't notify everybody that they don't have a house to sell, that's one of the options on the finance supplement. Within that 10-day window, if it's left blank, it's 10 days. The seller can say, I'm going to cancel because you haven't ordered the appraisal. You haven't notified me whether you got a house to sell or not. You haven't notified me that you paid the application fees and authorized the process to proceed. And the seller has the choice to cancel on you. And he's got to, I think he can notify you. And once you've received notice, you got 4 days grace there, Mr. Buyer, to straighten up. Otherwise, he can cancel. So that's what our forms actually say. And when I teach this class, so people are so surprised to know, oh my God, I didn't know it said that. And so that's why I'm here. Don't be hostage to this. And we've had our own transactions. We just closed one 2 or 3 weeks ago now where that happened. They did not notify us for 60 days. We kept extending the contract, or at least the first time it came up is when they wanted to extend the contract after, I think, 45 days. Buyers approved, everything's done, except the house they had sold in Noble couldn't close yet. And that was the first time Susanna even knew there was a house in Noble in the mix. And to the final day, it never closed. We had to find another buyer and sell it again, but we lost 60 or 90 days there, being gracious and extending. Finally, when we even knew about it, they kept saying, well, we just got to get this approved, with that approved, we got to use a different lender. And at the end of the day, there was some issue with the city of Noble where that property was sitting that they had to get the city council to agree on. And when I heard that, I said, shut it off. If they get that solved and we haven't sold to somebody else, bring it. Come on, let's close. Every title, roof's done, everything's ready. So anyway, I mean, that's all with a contract.
A lot going on right there.
Yeah. So, I mean, but here's what sometimes it's just saying, what do we do? Well, I guess we give them a little more time, well, at some point. And then that's what I want you to know.
They should have told you ahead of time that there was a contingency.
Absolutely. At least within 10 days. And that's what I love us to just think about. Did they order the appraisal? And do we know whether there was a house to sell or not, or if it's subject to one closing? They had it sold when they came along, and they didn't mention it. They just had it on contract. We didn't know there was another deal. And the lender never did ever tell us either until it finally came up and they needed to extend it for that reason.
Where do you list that there's a contingency? I don't remember seeing that on any of the forms.
Let's pull it up while we're at it here, because that's why I wanted you, Lisa, to bring your machine, because you might follow along with me here.
Is this in transaction desk?
Yep. Well, I'm going to go to .loop. Go to mykw.kw.com, and because that's what we're using a lot of. Susanna prefers transaction desk actually, but it's there. You could go there, but we might as well, because you're going to be loading these transactions into what we call our .loop files. So I'm going to go to this page right here. And since you got your computer, Lisa, that's what I want to see. Is can you log in to this yet?
Yeah, I've been in here playing.
All right. She's been playing.
But I have not been to the dot loop.
Yeah,
facility.
so I'm gonna go there. Now, what was I gonna show you?
Contingency
The
funds.
contingency where
Where's that go?
it says.
Excellent.
it's contingency.
That's exactly the kind of question. So when we get to here, right here's where these documents are held, under my transactions.
Can we play in there?
Yeah, you can do.
Yeah, I've made up loops and
Can
practice loops.
Okay.
Yeah, go to my transactions and you'll find, some loops and stuff that I've got made. But for time purposes, I'm gonna go straight to these templates over here.
Okay, now this part I'm having trouble getting logged into. Hang on, it's probably,
Yeah, it's your password maybe that you have to remember.
yeah, look. This is-
I'm gonna go on to it, then I'll come back after the class administrator. But let's go, Marilyn, I'm just gonna go to the Green Meadow file here. And I'm gonna, let's see, contract. Let's see, it's, see if I can just find
See if that's.
residential purchase contract right there. First of all, I just want to show you where to acknowledge. So here the form comes up, and right here at the top of this page,
Oh, okay, presently in a contract or not in a contract.
yeah, and there is a form named that. There's a form called sale of buyer's property, presently under contract. That would have been the one that they should have used. That way we'd have known that they had one under contract, but they have to close to buy. Or this one, they don't have it even on the market maybe. Or they have it on the market, but it's not under contract yet, so.
So we check like whatever loan, and then we check say it's under contract, or it's not under contract, it's for sale of buyers. So then we download the sale of buyer's property,
Yeah.
basically.
I'll pull it up here in a second and look at it,
Okay.
because it would be useful for you guys to know. But you're right, while I'm here, you're checking if there's financing or not. If you don't check conventional FHA assumption, so we're assuming it's cash, because the default down here says this is a cash transaction unless a financing supplement is attached. So the default is it's cash. Now I see a lot of people check this blank one and write cash in. That's being redundant, but there's no problem doing it. It's just an extra step that doesn't need to happen. So anyway, this is just the base contract that we're using now, Lisa, and I mean, it's not so greatly different than it used to be. But ultimately, yeah, here's where you check one of those or the other. Now let me go back to, I'm just gonna go back a notch. And let's find the, let me take this out and let's find that, what was that called? It was the form sale of buyers. Let me see if I can find that. It's supposed to pop it up, then it, sale of B-U-I-E-R. Well, it's not coming up. It might be that, that Janae has called it contingency form. Let me see if that's it. C-O-N-T-I-N. Okay. Offers, this is not, it's not obviously working to go to what I, contingency a demo, not under contract. Here's one of them. So she's renamed it contingency addendum. So this is one of them. It's sale of buyer's property condition. That's the name of the thing, but nobody can remember that or find it. They'll carry it. And so normally that's what you type in there, but anyway, you just flow down through all these forms until you find it. But this is the one, let's look at this while we're here. What's it say? Because this, the other one will be just like this, except it'll say presently under contract there. And it's a little different. It acknowledges that it's subject to the sale of that property, and it I think indicates when inspections will happen and that kind of a thing. On this one, it's just, you know, subject to, the contract is subject to termination for the failure of buyer to sell the buyer's property described here. So if you, whatever the address is, this deal is subject to terminating if you can't sell it. But what it does do, and I love the form, because if you don't use the form, you don't have a roadmap as to what's going to happen now with this contingency. This says, on before the closing date, status of buyer's property. Buyer represents that. Buyer's property is now listed exclusively for sale with a real estate brokerage firm. Or buyer shall list the buyer's property with a real estate brokerage firm within 2 days of acceptance of this contract. It does not say that you can be a for sale by owner. We've had some that wanted to be a for sale by owner, and so we had to work around that and ask the seller, do you feel like taking your house off the market and letting a gross amateur it's hard enough for us to sell them, but them, to try to sell it themselves and then manage that transaction without us being involved and knowing what's going on and take your house off the market under those terms. So this requires that. That's real important. Then continuation, seller's property shall remain on the market. So we're acknowledging that you've got a house to sell, but we're going to leave ours on the market and seller may continue to show and offer seller's property for sale until the termination condition is removed.
So that's when you go under contract.
That's right.
That's when they set it to.
That's right. So
So at that point, you can take another contract or not until.
You can take contracts all the way up to closing.
And they'll give you a 72-hour kickoff clause.
yeah, actually the minimum's 24. I believe it's down here, it says that. Talks about the demand to remove this contingency. And this one says minimum 24, but the form you use to notify the people, hey, we have another contract on this, they have their house sold or they don't have a house to sell. Then we notify this first buyer, and they can put 72 hours or 48 or 24, whatever. They got to put at least 24 in that blank, but there's a blank on that form saying we're notifying you now that we've got another contract. So the answer to your question is, we're leaving it on the market, it says, to find another buyer that has either got their house already sold or does not have to sell one.
So you leave it active.
Leave it active. It's active, but it's contingency under terms. You let people know. Kick-out clause is a thing in the MLS you can put in there, and then I put it in the remarks too. That currently under contract, looking for a buyer without a house to sell or has theirs sold already. But you can't sell it to somebody that's already got a house, that has a house to sell still. If they got a house to sell and it's not under contract,
So that contingency out for another contingency.
That's exactly it, Marilyn. So here, let's talk about that dynamic though a little. Mr. Seller, you're about to agree to take this proposal with a contingency to sell their house. You're willing to work with them. We've been having trouble trying to get it sold. Let's work with somebody. Let's get something going. What are you going to take now is the question. Because if you take less than your asking price or less than value, you cannot have another buyer come next week that's got a house to sell say, you know what, I would have paid you $5,000 more. You can't take that guy's proposal now. You just have to tell him, hurry up, run, get your house sold and come back and talk to us. We can't sell that to you. So in the negotiation where we have this dynamic, it's prudent probably for us to trade. We'll work with you on the contingency, but you're going to have to work with us on our price. And if we've got our market analysis done and we've got a fair price on it, if we're grossly overpriced, well, that's another problem. But if we can defend our price, I at least have my seller best I can try to get close to what you're asking on this, because I'm not going to get you any more than that from another buyer like this. I can't get you that. The next guy that comes along that's got his house sold, he could make you a bigger offer and you can take that. Or smaller. It doesn't, that's right. It doesn't matter. In fact, what happens sometimes, we have it under contract with this guy. It's not selling to anybody else. His is not selling. And we're talking about, let's correct our price. We're overpriced here. And we're sitting there saying, well, we've got $200,000 on the table from this guy, but we're getting ready to drop ours to 190. Well, we can do that and sell it to somebody else for 190 when he had a contract on it for 200, but he couldn't get his house sold. So those are the dynamics that are playing along. And that's what I suggest is if you're asking me to take our house or work with you on a contingency basis, then be prepared to pay pretty close to what the value is, because I can't get more than that from anybody else if they've got the same terms. So, but I can leave it right, it stays active in the MLS, but we need to let people know there is this other offer. And the seller is control of if it's 24 or 48 or 72 hours at the moment that all happens. They don't have to make that decision up front. And depending, if it's a weekend, say this all comes together on a Friday afternoon, and you've got this other proposal that came in, they don't have a house to sell, and you're now in agreement, that seller may say, well, it's Friday at 6, maybe we can give them till Monday at 5 or something like that to drop their contingency so that if they need to talk to a banker or something else. Because here's what it is. If they're going to remove their contingency, in other words, the buyer, we give them the notice and the first buyer says, I'm going to drop my contingency. This tells you, okay, you're not just going to call me like they called me on that Silverleaf property in 1979 and say, we're dropping our contingency. And I said, oh, good, did you get your house sold? No, we're just dropping it. And that meant we are stuck now with you until the end of this transaction because I didn't have any rules. But here's what would have, they just called and said, we're just dropping it.
How did I do that?
Phone call. They just basically said, well, it's still contingent on us getting financing. We're not going to get a loan either way, so we don't care. So, I mean, I didn't know any better. There was no form at that time. But, I mean, that's what we're preventing. Somebody just calling and saying, listen, I think we'll just take the gamble that we're going to get our house sold and closed and time for you for a closing day.
There's no risk for them because once they can't get financing.
Can't get financing, it's still subject to the loan, and they can't get the loan, so they just get their earnest money back because they didn't get the loan. So this will prevent that. Because what it says here, to remove the termination condition, buyer shall have buyer's property under contract to close on or before the closing date of the contract, subject to no conditions other than inspection, title, survey, and so on. Got their house under contract. Or deliver to the seller written verification from a financial institution or any other lender of the availability of sufficient funds or financing to close the transaction without selling the buyer's property. So those two choices is what you have. You're either going to prove you can buy it without selling it, or you have it sold. And if you read down here, it basically states you'll even supply an actual copy of the purchase contract to us to prove you have it sold. If you're saying to us, we're dropping it because we've got A here. We've got a contract on it that's going to close on or before this contract date that we have. And then basically, I don't know where it says it on here exactly. But in these paragraphs down here, it goes into, because it's saying, let's see, such notice shall be accompanied by whichever is applicable. A true copy of valid, bona fide contract to purchase buyer's property, or some written verification. So they're actually, if they've got their house under contract, would send you a copy of the contract, signed documents, and say, here's proof. That's what that document says. So that's why if you have that, we haven't happened, where they've got a house to sell, they want to buy something. My recommendation is get your house on the market before you buy something and get somebody interested, and then control it with timelines so that you give yourself plenty of time to find something else and close on it and get your own, stuff lined up before you even start. But if they didn't do that and they just had to be out looking around and they fall in love with something, they don't have a house on the market, for God's sake, use this. Because it requires them to list it. You happen to be handy already. I'm already here. I already know what's going on this end. It'd be good if I knew what was going on this end too. I'll just be listing this property myself. It'd be the best thing. So the other one is similar to this, except it just says presently under contract, which acknowledges there is one. So
what happens if this, like in this recent situation with you, if they just don't disclose it to you? Can you terminate the contract yourself?
You could. In fact, Susanna could have at the end of 10 days
If they don't disclose it to you?
that finance supplement,
Okay.
because they defaulted on the agreement after 10 days because of that.
Well, that's like they lied to you.
And did the lender not put it in their letter that the financing was contingent on?
No, and I'm going to show you let's look at the, let's go, I'm just going to find one of the finance addendums, FHA, find, move.
Yeah, that's just not here.
I don't know. Well, let me show you what I've been talking about here. All of the finance supplements, all of them, basically read conventional, VA, all have the same language. But right down here is what I've been describing to you. That, I don't know if you can see it or not. But you see those four. Make application for the described loan. We got 5 days to do that. But then, buyer shall also instruct lender to issue a written statement of conditional loan approval, not final loan approval, to the seller, and care of broker, if applicable, within 10 days of left blank of the time reference date regarding the following. Review and approval of buyer's creditworthiness, income, and funds necessary to close. In other words, those things have been looked at after 10 days. Got the funds to close. They've got creditworthiness. The score is good enough. Then the next one, confirmation that buyers paid initial processing fees, whatever it is. And that's where I would mention, oh, by the way, there is an authorization that you've got to do as soon as the buyer gets the lender gets these documents that says you're authorizing them to proceed. And until they get that, they won't do anything. They'll just sit there and, because it's Dodd-Frank, it's a law, a rule that the Dodd-Frank law put into play, where that they cannot start ordering this and that or do anything until they got that authorization, either verbally over the phone, documented, or email or text or something. Here's the one. Property appraisal has been ordered. 10 days, you see? And then there's the fourth one, which is the one we're talking about. Loan approval is not subject to sale or closing of the buyer's current property unless stated elsewhere in the contract. That one is the one that, see, 10 days if left blank. Where Susanna could have said, she could have gone to the cancellation form, and right in the middle section of the cancellation form is a place where the seller can notify them, hey, you didn't do 1, 2, or whatever ones they are. And I'm giving you a little grace period here to get this done. But if you don't get this done in the next 4 days, I am canceling. And they have a right to do it.
On the 10 days.
Yes.
Okay. So whenever I get my contract, whenever I get to sell the listing agent to fill out her information. But anyway, whenever I get it completely done, then to get it to the lender, where he can, do I wait until after inspections clear?
No.
Okay, so as soon as I get all the signatures, then I send it to the lender.
Yeah.
Okay.
As soon as you have a meeting of the minds,
Okay.
the title company ought to now be notified, hey, we need abstracting, get the title work stuff going on this one. And then the lender, hey, we've got this house under contract, now we need the loan. Those two people need to have copies sent. You can, when you're putting this dot loop thing together, when you're right here doing this and you're setting it all up, it'll ask you who are the parties, and you can name the listing broker, selling broker, whoever you are or they are, and then the lender, the title company can also be included. And so the stuff that's relevant to the title company just goes to the title company as soon as the last signature is done. So this is a little bit of what your first time or two, you may need some help with Suzanne. You can do this in her sleep. Christina can do it in her sleep as far as her help is concerned too. So we got a couple of places where you could go and just get somebody to say, walk me through this. Because it's, I'm no good at it. I don't do this stuff. I can show you, I can show you here on this one right here where I can go up here and add a signature, initials, a text, a date, a name, all here, right under here. I can just add that to any part of this contract. And, it'll do it. I can print it from here, I can save it, so on. But when you add it to a loop, once it's all filled in, that loop is just a file folder. If you can think of this dot loop as a file cabinet, and in the file cabinet there are file folders, and this loop is just one of the file folders in there. So instead of going back there and grabbing it out there, you just go here and get it. It's just that same thing.
So who all can share in this loop, like if we're dealing with Century 21,
Yeah.
they get in our loop?
Well, if you name them as a selling agent or the listing agent, then only stuff that's pertinent to the selling agent would they be able to see. But you could add them into the loop.
Do they like being added to these loops?
Yeah.
Because I know how cranky they can be.
Oh, well, I mean, if they want to have copies of the
But I
forms
know
and stuff.
some of them prefer transaction.
Yeah, I think, Keller Williams people use the dot loop because at the end of the day, we're loading everything, the final paperwork ends up in the loop
Ours
for us. But yeah, it might be that they're not familiar with the dot loop. We've been using it for a few years now, so most of them are. The transaction desk is probably, well, Susanna's just more familiar with it, so she thinks it's a little easier. You could put everything together in a transaction desk and send it to them, get signature, get everything done, and then print it off, scan it, and put it in the loop. So you can do it that way. I don't think you would mix and match it. You would do all one or all the other. And so Susanna has used I don't know if she's still using transaction desk.
I think she did.
Probably with Mary. Yeah. So when she got done, she just scanned that all into the company's file folder.
It's like
And
a
that's
whole
how that.
other step. that
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one more step that you wouldn't have to do if you were using dot loop to start with.
I just want to make
But-
sure other realtors out there are okay with it.
She would be a good resource to talk to about, what works best as far as cross sales are concerned. The people using dot loop in our company, except maybe brand new people, pretty familiar with it here, and it's not foreign to
So I
them.
guess you could call the co-broker, the listing broker and say, do you mind? Or how would it best work for you?
Yeah, and either way, I mean, if you got the buyer and you start the offer in dot loop, then
They just did.
they might have to deal with that, or you can just, I'm not sure how you load it in
It's
transaction.
nice to be on the good side though.
Sorry, and I'm not saying that this is, this is just what we do. We send it via dot loop, but we always attach the PDF, and there's just a box that says attach PDF to email.
Yeah.
So we send it via dot loop, but they have that PDF, so they can just pull it and
Okay.
download it into whatever they are using.
Yeah,
Okay.
And then their people sign it, shoot it back to us.
It's not loop, but they get it in a different.
Yeah, like when you go in there and you click on whoever you're sending it to, as you
That
get
way
to
they
the
don't
bottom.
have to do it in dot loop. They can do it
Exactly.
outside of
And
that.
so they'll
Yeah.
send it back to me and.
it'll just
and
be
it's
an
on
email.
Or whatever they're using, and then usually they have a PDF back to me and I just open the PDF, send
And
it
it
back
goes
to
back
them.
into dot loop. Okay.
Yeah,
So
that's
that-
excellent. That's the voice of experience, knowing what to do with that, because that PDF is just an email now. They just get an email and they'll email up and there's the documents on it.
And then I just have my files at every house and I just save all the PDFs.
So I wonder why Susanna does it with transaction desk. Because I know she told me she prefers it, but I can't remember now why she said she did.
May have been just because the listing agent on that one was more familiar with it and just
I've
preferred it.
asked. But if you can do it in dot loop, it sounds like it'd be better. This dot loop sounds screwed up.
Yeah, sometimes if it doesn't, it's not working.
Oh, my gosh.
Every once in a while, it's software. So sometimes it's not working, you have to do something else. It'd be good to know how to do both.
But they're pretty
But,
similar, aren't they?
When something doesn't work, you get the scanner put on this, and you take a picture, you print everything out, and you take pictures, and you email it, and they send it back.
All right, this is 11 o'clock. This thing broadcast, I think, the entire time today. We didn't drop it once that I know of. We'll see if we heard it. I'll listen to the replay for a minute or two later. But Midwest City and Shawnee, we're signing off. Continue on discussing whatever you're talking about. And we'll see you down the line. Stop. Oh, I'm used to my iPad.